It was supposed to be a fun weekend. Just 4 of us, old college friends, catching up over a camping trip in the woods. We'd done it before, but this time felt different. Maybe it was the remote location deep in the heart of Black Hollow Forest. Or maybe it was the eerie silence that blanketed the area as soon as we arrived. Whatever it was, I should have trusted my gut and turned back. We set up camp just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, twisted shadows through the towering pines. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. It felt perfect, until it didn't. After dinner, we sat around the fire, passing around a bottle of cheap whiskey, swapping stories like we always did. It was Tom who suggested we share scary stories this time. "Let's make it interesting," he said, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Whoever tells the scariest story wins." We all agreed, laughing, thinking it was just harmless fun. But looking back, I realized that's when everything started to go wrong. Tom went first. He told a story about a man-eating creature that lurked in the forest, dragging unsuspecting hikers into the shadows. He described it in vivid detail, its long, clawed fingers, the way its eyes glowed like embers in the dark, and how it left behind deep gashes in the trees as a warning. Next was Sarah. She spun a tale about a ghostly woman in white who haunted the woods, luring campers to their deaths with her mournful cries. According to her story, if you heard her weeping at night, it meant she was close, and you'd better run. Jake followed, his story darker than the rest. He spoke of a deranged hermit who lived off the grid, stalking hikers and collecting their belongings as trophies. He described finding a tattered backpack hanging from a tree, with bloodstains still visible on the fabric. Finally, it was my turn. I felt the pressure to come up with something equally chilling, so I improvised. I told them about the Shadow Man, a figure that followed people through the woods, mimicking their every move until they turned around, and then it would vanish, leaving behind only footprints in the dirt. We all laughed when I finished, clapping each other on the back, pretending we weren't spooked. But deep down, I could feel a strange tension hanging in the air, like the forest was listening. That night, as I lay in my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woods were too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. I told myself it was just the stories getting to me, but part of me knew better. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Tom shouting. I stumbled out of my tent, rubbing my eyes, and saw him standing near the edge of our campsite, pointing at something on a tree. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight. I walked over and felt my stomach drop. Deep, jagged claw marks were etched into the bark, just like the ones from his story. They were fresh, the wood still raw and splintered. "Probably a bear," Jake muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. We tried to shake it off, but as we packed up our gear for a day hike, the unease lingered. The trail we followed twisted deeper into the forest, and the farther we went, the more I felt like we were being watched. Around midday, Sarah stopped dead in her tracks. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. We all froze, straining our ears. At first I heard nothing, just the wind rustling the leaves. But then, faint and distant, I caught the sound of crying. A woman's sobs, echoing through the trees. "It's just someone else out here," Jake said, but his voice wavered. "No one else camps this deep," Tom whispered. Panic prickled at the edges of my mind. Sarah's story flashed through my head, and I saw the fear mirrored in her eyes. We picked up the pace, moving faster, trying to put distance between us and the sound. But the crying followed us, growing louder, more desperate. When we finally reached a clearing, we stopped to catch our breath. That's when Jake spotted it, a tattered backpack hanging from a low branch, just like in his story. It was old, faded, and stained with something dark. This is messed up," Tom muttered. We didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run back to camp, but the other part was frozen, gripped by a growing sense of dread. That's when I saw it. Footprints in the dirt, circling the clearing. They matched our shoe prints exactly, like someone had been following us, step for step. My stomach turned. "Guys," I whispered, "this is my story." The realization hit us all at once. The stories we told around the campfire weren't just stories anymore. They were becoming real. We didn't wait to find out what would happen next. We bolted back toward camp, hearts pounding, the forest closing in around us. The trees seemed taller, the shadows darker, and the air heavier with every step. When we finally reached the campsite, we found it in shambles. Our tents were slashed open, our gear scattered, and claw marks gouged into the ground. The fire pit was still smoldering, even though we'd put it out the night before. "We have to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. But as we turned to leave, we heard it, a low growl coming from the tree line. Red eyes glinted in the shadows, watching us, the creature from Tom's story. We ran. I don't remember how far or how long, but we didn't stop until we saw the faint glow of headlights from a ranger's truck on the main road. We flagged him down, babbling about what happened, but he just shook his head. "You're lucky," he said. "People don't usually come back from Black Hollow." We never went camping again after that. We don't even talk about it. But sometimes late at night, I hear footsteps outside my window, matching my every move. And I know, the story's never really ended.